Well, good morning. Welcome to Over a Brew. I can see Ben's already sipping there. It looks like a Van Gogh mug to me there, Ben. It's a very arty type of. Yeah, there we go. Starry Night thing. I've noticed that. We're joined this morning by colleagues from across a couple of oceans, I want to say. So we're very grateful for their time. We're going to get them to introduce themselves in a second. And in our Over a Brew series, so far we've been doing so much AI stuff. We didn't get to talk about other fun things that we want to discuss. And we've been so interested and involved with developing XR type of solutions for our college, for our learners, that I'm a bit gutted we didn't get to talk about it yet, to be honest with you. So it's a bit late in the year to do it, but I'm happy we're here. So thank you all for joining me. We're going to get you to introduce yourselves in a second. Like Rich said just before, you're going to miss it if anyone is listening. We don't want all serial numbers or anything, but tell us a little bit about yourselves, what you're doing, and just to kind of set up what we're doing here. So I thought we'll do that and wrap it up in a question as well, if that's okay, just to make it a bit harder for you. So okay. We're here talking about XR. I know I'm not making things easy. We're wrapping it in a question so we can link it to that. Just because we're talking about XR, and there'll be people there who go, "What the heck is XR? I don't know what that is." There's too many acronyms in tech. There's definitely too many acronyms in education. Education is full of them, unfortunately. So we're going to start with our first opening type of question. What is VR, XR, AR, MR, whatever we want to link it to, and where do we fit in that type of landscape? Okay, I'm going to start with Rich to make it easier for everyone here.
Great, lovely. Thanks, Tibi. Yeah, so Richard Fullylove, Head of Technology, Enhanced Learning and Engagement, which kind of gives a little bit of the game away, really, in terms of the number of hats that title kind of entails. But for me, over the last few years, that proposition of extended reality, that kind of umbrella term that, as you say, encompasses virtual reality, augmented reality, now mixed reality, is the creation of experiential learning, simulations, interactions that learners can engage with as part of not only their studies, but in terms of the development of things like their employability skills. And that kind of technology wrap around that allows them either to experience things that would be too costly for us, or too risky and dangerous for them, one of our famous sort of frameworks and acronyms we like to use, but really how it can transport them and transport their learning experience. And that's been my goal for the last sort of, I guess, 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rich. Should we come to you, Ben?
Yeah, yep. So I'm Ben Barrett, CEO at Facilitate in Perth, Australia, and just verifying I'm actually a real person. I'm not AI. I'm not digitally generated. And we are a few hours ahead, and I can confirm that this is just genuine tea. There's no special ingredients in the brew today. So yeah, I can talk. I can't really add too much more to what Rich said there about XR, but I mean, I guess one thing is that they have different use cases, certainly. So VR, it's fully immersive. It takes you into a completely artificial setting where you can provide learners with experiences on demand. Mixed reality is sort of mixing the blend of real world and the digital. So you can bring in digital assets to real world environments and have people interacting with those objects like they were, so to speak, in their real world environment. And then augmented reality is just more of an overlay, I think, of information. So yeah, that's sort of my 2 cents on the umbrella term of what XR is and what it includes. So hand it over to Philip.
Yeah, great. Hi guys, my name's Philip. I'm Chief Product at Facilitate. Also coming to you live from Australia, from the East Coast on the other side, about 3,500 k's away on the other side from Ben. Yeah, great to be here. So look, I'm a psychologist by background, passionate about adult learning in particular. And I guess my take's a little bit different. So yeah, there's AR and there's VR and stuff, but fundamentally I think in particular VR, for me, what it is it's a modality to create experiences for people to learn. you know, and it's a modality that allows you to do that with very high realism, but quite cost effectively, you know. Yeah, I'm ex-military by background, and we used to do a lot of simulations and very, very powerful learning experiences, but they're incredibly expensive, you know, to do all this in real life. So now we have technology where we can create those sorts of experiences without that cost, you know. So that's sort of my take on it. Yeah.
I love that. I really love that. As just describing it as a different modality of running that type of simulation. And a lot of the time for us, especially in further education, we get so stuck sometimes in what the curriculum is, what the awarding body wants, what the assessment is, that the areas that would need that type of investment that you're describing there, Philipp, where we need to add an extra layer of experience to that learning, is sometimes doesn't really get met. And for us, it's really exciting to pursue that. And to really try to make use of it. I know Rich just alluded there as well to that DICE acronym we borrowed from Stanford, really, of how do we pick what goes into an XR type of let's just go with it, a VR type of simulation, and what doesn't? What stays on a 2D screen? What stays on a paper type of exercise? What stays in just a normal conversation? And what jumps into a VR type of simulation? And why should we do it? I'm asking the question there. For those that don't know what that is, the DICE acronym from Stanford is basically around experiences that are dangerous, impossible, or improbable, counterproductive, or expensive, right? So let's not check email in VR. I think that's the reductive type of thinking around that. But you get, everyone should get what I'm saying with that is, how do we pick that? And I would love to hear your thoughts on that. How do we pick what goes into VR, and why should we put effort and, like Ben said, like Philipp said, cost into it as well? Why should we do that, and how do we pick those? Who wants to go?
Okay, I'll see what I can add to that one. I think for me, and as Phil alluded to there, the cost of development and content creation, and as you say, relevant curriculum content. But I think it's a little bit more intrinsic to the learner experience around that, and developing things that I don't want to say have a broad appeal and multi-purpose, but things that could be used across multiple areas within, particularly an educational institution. If I were to use a very simple example in terms of, say, medical training, healthcare, social care, having immersive experiences, like you say, that are difficult, costly, impractical to provide, but which touch on many areas. So take anatomy and physiology. Okay. The fact that, interaction with the human cadaver, with the body, immersion there, being able to see inside a heart, lungs, explore that could be applied across multiple curriculum areas. And I think, as Philipp says, it's that multimodality for a broader range of learners. And I think that's probably a good starting point before you then get into developing content specifically for some of those areas.
Okay.
No, that's right. I think there's fundamentally a number of reasons why it's worth exploring VR for learning in particular. Philipp's probably the more qualified to talk to the cognitive aspects, but just from a business perspective, like why we see organisations going down this path, often it stems with issues around cost savings in training. For example, if people, like learners, are in different locations, actually getting them into one, or getting the content to them in high quality content, giving them the opportunities to practice skills, learn from experts who might be in different locations. You can save a lot of time and cost in providing XR experiences. But then also other challenges, such as, even if you had the budget to go and fly people to one specific location to have that training, how do you scale that? How do you get thousands of people doing that? So VR allows you to create something once. But hypothetically, again, if you had, endless budget to actually go and fly everyone to that location to do that training in person, how do you standardize that training experience to make sure that everyone gets the same experience at the same level of quality And XR, VR in particular, can guarantee all of those in one hit.
Love that.
Love that. Yeah, no, really good. Maybe just quickly what I can add to that. Yeah, that accessibility piece I think is quite interesting, especially in a country like Australia. We have a very large geographical landmass, and we have to reach people in very remote areas, healthcare staff in remote areas, policing, first responders and stuff in remote areas, and the accessibility of training, of high quality training often suffers. So you get this metro regional divide, where the metro will get the higher quality or more often the training, and then the regions suffer a bit. So that's certainly one thing. The other thing I want to say is maybe the simulation. So the impossible in that DICE model I think is particularly interesting. Especially what I find really exciting is the stuff that's coming out now with AI and the generative ability of AI.
Yeah.
So if you marry that with some of the pedagogical imperatives, if you think about it, truly creating adaptive learning, right? So you're able to not have a rigid step experience or simulation for a person. You can genuinely adjust it on the fly as they respond. That is just so much more powerful, because you're taking into account what the person already knows, the lived experience that they already bring. And again, from an adult learning perspective, it's so much of a better experience, and it's more powerful than sticking to a set of content. So things in that nature are particularly well placed for these technologies.
Of course it is, and a lot of time we talk about that in education is teachers struggle in particular to quantify what learners bring with them, especially the ones that don't come from traditional educational backgrounds. And that is so, like you said, is so powerful when you're exposed in that type of situation, and you can bring things you already know and skills you already have without having to verbalize them in a different way or communicate them in a different way. I just love that. I just want to stick with that idea, if that's okay, and just pivot back to you guys. What do you see as the main blockers when it comes to implementing these solutions? When you try to implement, I know Ben mentioned their scale, mentioned standardization as well. What are the blockers we see in terms of bringing this type of solution to training, to education in general?
A good question. I think really, VR as a technology has been commercially available at scale since 2016, but it's still reasonably early in its adoption. So I think understanding of where it fits in and how they go about it really is a blocker for a lot of organizations. We used to get often, why would we go about using immersive technologies for learning? But now it's more a how and the process kind of question. So I think that's certainly one of the key blockers that I see.
Mm. Yeah, I think another one, I'm sort of in customer success as well with Facilitate, and I work a little bit closely with customers that are implementing. And I think one thing that I see, even if they get the YVR, they get the general argument that it's a more powerful sort of learning method. But I think sometimes another blocker is you need to reconcile what's possible with these technologies, with what's going to make business sense, like Ben was saying.
Cool.
And I think sometimes that's where they get a little bit lost. You'll get organisations like saying, "Oh, I want to turn this 58-page PDF into a VR experience," and it's all declarative knowledge. It's facts and figures. I'm like, guys, this is not. You don't teach facts and figures in VR. Like, give the person an experience. Give them. Focus on stuff that matters. And of course, they don't know, because it's very much something you have to experience to go, okay, I get it. That's why I wouldn't put a 28-page PDF into an experience, So I think sometimes that can be a bit, maybe it's not a blocker, but it's sort of a bit, okay, we get it, but how do we create value with it now? Like, now what, So it's a bit of a challenge sometimes.
Yeah.
That's cool. Rich, anything you've encountered?
Almost definitely, yes. It sounds painful, doesn't it? Certainly cost, but as Ben says, the cost of immersive technologies, it has, that's reduced phenomenally. But I think one of the main barriers, if you like, is scale. We've seen a lot of that across the educational sector. You'll see small pockets of success, fantastic innovation centers small pilots within, say, schools across universities. But then how do you, and the challenge is scaling that beyond that glass ceiling.
Yeah.
Getting that out to the masses, if you like, across that institution and, in fact, across the sector, I would say. You know, going from, 20 headsets to 200 headsets to 300 headsets. Of course, there are other barriers there around, accessibility, fantastic to then have services that are not just immersive, but are accessible to all users. But yes, that. But then coming back to, as Philip was saying there, likewise, you're not going to replace a 20-slide PowerPoint for Unit 2.671 of the psychology curriculum with a fully immersive experience. It's different. And I think that's part of working, particularly in the education sector, with tutors and educators to think beyond that curriculum.
I love that.
And getting into, we've explored this quite extensively over the last few years, but actually designing the learning experience and all those different modalities around the learner and learning, not necessarily the time constraints that the tutor has or the framework they have to work with, the assignments they have to set, the hours that they have to deliver that. And that's a big enough challenge in the sector. But yes, certainly designing for learning around the learner.
Yeah.
To make the most out of these immersive technologies.
I totally agree with that. It's a creative effort, I think, and you have to kind of redesign what we do. You can't just get the £5 VR note and just slip it in somewhere along the process and hopefully it fits and it works, because that's what we usually get. I just want to add something as well, and I don't know if you guys found that as well. I find that sometimes gamification or gaming in general works against it, because it's perceived sometimes too much of a gaming type of modality rather than learning. So for me, sometimes I talk to people and they go, yeah, my son uses that to play whatever. And, oh yeah, they've done the roller coaster one and I felt a bit sick or something. And it's trying to get people thinking beyond that. There's so much more than that. And I think that leads us really well to what you guys do. And it'll be really interesting. I think, well, obviously we found it very interesting what you're creating at Facilitate. And I think it would be interesting for everyone to hear that. But just to match it to what's happening there in the marketplace, there are lots more solutions when it comes to off-the-shelf VR type of experiences. But what we found is that those experiences are not always what we want. They're not the right £5 note to use the same expression there that we want to bring into what we're doing. So that's obviously how we've encountered you, and we started chatting. So would you mind telling us a little bit more about how do you feel that Facilitate fits in the narrative of what's happening in VR training and learning out there? And what are you guys offering that's maybe a bit different than what we've seen before?
No, really, really good question. I mean, we have seen this evolution in the VR learning content space, and we often like to break it down into three different areas. You can get content created by software developers, which they can build basically anything. That it comes with a cost in terms of dollar value and also the time. It can take months to build something, and then it can also run into $100,000 plus. So there's very, very limited scalability in going down that path. There is a growing library of off-the-shelf content, which you mentioned there, and there's some really good content in the more soft skills types of areas as well that we've seen. We know that you guys are using some great products in that respect, and some of them even allow you to then go and edit them to be specific to your context. And there are areas like manual handling where it doesn't really matter, what the context is. Manual handling is manual handling. But we've really kind of looked at the in-depth needs of organizations, and we think that there was quite a gap in the market for organizations to create content that was very specific to their needs. So their locations, their processes, their procedures, their assets, those types of things. And that's sort of exactly what we're trying to do is democratize who can go and create this type of content, just to really reflect what's possible, with e-learning content creation, for example. It's been a trend in really digital technologies as a whole that empowering people that have subject matter expertise but may not be, innately technically inclined, as software developers. So that's fundamentally what we do at Facilitate.
Yeah, I mean, I might just quickly add that I think that democratisation is a really interesting point, especially in organisations. But everyone's got something to add. Everyone's got something to share with the world. We've got so many experiences, and especially in organisations where you have a lot of subject matter experts, 20, 40 years in the industry. How do you get that out from between their ears and over to someone else, without it being incredibly complex? And this is the opportunity that we see with Facilitate, is that you make it easy enough so that they can sit down and they can author something themselves, and they can share some of that stuff. And from an organizational point of view, from a knowledge management point of view, that's incredibly powerful, because there is the brain drain and all that sort of stuff that that we're well aware of, and there's just so much learning that can be had from the younger guys as they go into the workforce. So making that as easy as possible, is definitely where we're at.
We loved your platform, because again, it's something you can quickly take over and try and start expressing yourself and trying to find like we said, like Rich was saying, those quick wins. What are things that fit a lot of areas? How do we then scale that up? And Rich has done fantastic work in terms of deploying all the right technology and the infrastructure as well, so we can run that at scale. Because sometimes we either get caught in the hardware type of challenge, or we can then get caught in the software, applications, games type of, and it's such a complex endeavor when you run it at 4 campuses and in terms of that type of scale, and you have different areas, different curriculum areas, different tutors. It's not easy. So the method that worked for us with the engagement hubs through Rich, I think, it worked really well. I would assume you agree in terms of deploying it. It took a little bit. He's got a few less teeth than he did.
it was a bit of a dentist job, I think.
That one. But it's taken a while. But for us, what you guys bring in terms of the Facilitate platform, it's like almost a foundation that we can then use like you said, Philipp, our own expertise to build in some of those solutions and target them in areas. It's definitely not as long as the first solution that Ben mentioned, and not as costly, which is, thank goodness for that. We don't have that type of money. But it's a start, and we've done a lot of stuff around, induction, health and safety type of experiences and so on. But just because we have that already, and that already exists in the e-learning space, I just want to bring it to the next question: is what's next? What do you want to see in the XR world? What do you want to produce in terms of Facilitate? What are your updates coming? Share a bit of your roadmap, whatever you're comfortable with sharing, in terms of deployments and developments around the platform. I'm just going to start with Rich. What do you want to see, Rich? What's the next thing you want to see in VR? Not necessarily from these guys.
Okay. Again, I think some of the things are already out there. Some of the things that I'd like to see us implement, some of the things I'd like to see the sector implement already exist. So it's not too far in the future. I mean, I'm thinking of those sort of large scale, location-based experiences where you've got 120 students in a room, in headsets.
Now you're talking.
Where they can see each other, but they're really experiencing a different world. They're transported, they're immersed. Because, we didn't mention this earlier, but there's a sort of, I think, an industry-led vibe at the moment that immersive experiences, and I'm not going to say are wrong, but isolate learners. But I think there are things we're currently saying that, that's not true. On a cultural footing, some of the things that are being created, and not just in terms of education and industry, but experience.
Yes. And
cultural experience for users and for users of that technology. For me, it's combining some of those things. And as Ben was saying, how then learners can interact across oceans, if you like, in those spaces, beyond maybe that simple, again, I should be careful here, that those simply gamified avatars to actual true representations You're stepping into that VR deck. You're on another world. There's your colleague from across the ocean, and you're sat down having a brew. That kind of interaction, not, as you say, the reading the email, the checking the presentation.
Usually that's what we see, right? We see that type of solo experience in VR rather than anything that is cooperative. So bringing that together would be amazing. What about you guys? What do you want to see? What's coming up next? Are you adding some AI protein in your product?
Yeah, is now the time to talk about that?
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, just before I get into that, though, I just want to pick up on Richard's point. Like, I think that's a really good point, especially with some of the really high fidelity studio created experiences. They're often single player, so to speak, and you go in there and you have an experience. And we know that's not really how learning works in the real world, right? Social learning is a thing. We bounce ideas off one another, and especially in a sort of peer apprentice, sort of framework and stuff. So that's certainly, I think we've already built into our platform, so our content can be consumed asynchronously individually, but also synchronously. So learners and more experienced, facilitators, or maybe just two learners, can go in together and problem solve. And I personally want to take that idea a little bit further. Just a couple of quick ones around the learning side. So really want to build in more structured adult learning principles, some of like Cobb's experiential learning cycles, experience, reflection, conceptualization, and then experimentation, those sorts of things. But to do that, be able to do that together, as we were just saying, I think would be quite powerful. And the other one is to promote like problem-centered design as opposed to content-orientated design for the creators, right? So create the tool so it's already baked in, so it makes it easy for someone to create an experience, a scenario focused around a problem, as opposed to we got to get through this type of content and stuff. And so I guess just quickly to finish off AI, I'll let Ben speak a little bit more about that as well. But I think basically for me, from a product side, we're just going to use AI to underpin all. So, generative AI to three-dimensional models, to create CGI environments, where people can walk around. Essentially, you can populate those environments with all manner of interactable objects. The other one I mentioned at the very beginning is this idea of adaptive learning and obviously hyper-personalised learning. So you can put in some sort of context into the scenario, and then the scenario takes that context into account. And that context can be as broad as an organization's policies around some sort of safety training, but it can also be quite specific to, say, a set of learners and maybe a cultural aspects or something. And you can feed that in, and then with AI we can start to tweak the way the learning is presented to the learner and the way they experience it. That is then more adaptive as they're going through it. So they're just sort of a couple of the top ones.
Yeah, definitely. You guys are very, very well aware of how fast AI is evolving and just the impact it's having now. But when in a year, the conversation will look very, very different. So it's sort of relating back to what Philipp's saying. We're looking at it from the perspective of how can we ease the journey for the creator. Make creating just as simple as possible, as impactful as possible. But then also from the other side for the actual learner themselves. So there's a whole host of areas that will be bringing AI into the platform. But the whole product really is built off two foundations. It's how can we make that creation journey as easy and simple as possible, and then what's the impact we can actually have on the learner. So that will be driving all our decisions going forward around AI. Yeah.
I love that. I think the more we build around the experience for the learner, for the user, I think the more impact it's going to have. And we ran quite a few events where we've run anything from games to, education type of outreachy type of events. And it's so interesting to see someone that comes out of VR, and although they had a solo experience, all they want to do is talk to someone else about it.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly right. They want to share, right?
They want to share it. And for me, that's what I want to capture. I want to put that in a jar and go, that's what I want to be able to deliver every time. Because whatever it is, if if it makes you feel something and it engages you at that level, that you high level of presence, you feel you're there and you're engaged with it, I think we're already winning, and learning happens in and around that. So for me, that's what I want to see, whether that means gamification, whether that means like you said, AI-enabled, problem-based, scenario-based type of learning. I'm all in. I know we ran a little bit over time. I just want to thank you all for my brew is over. I don't know if yours is as well. I think so needs to be our conversation for now. But yeah, thank you again for participating. Thank you for the chat. I think we need to pick this back up again.
I think we do. I think there's lots of other topics.
There's lots of stuff to unpick,
yes,
right?
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, thank you all again. Have a lovely afternoon. We're just going to start getting on with our day now. Lovely to see you both. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks both.
Catch you soon.
Thanks, Tibi. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Tibi. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Great to chat.
And we're out.